As the United Nations General Assembly gets underway for a second day, Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi has embarked on a 3-day visit to the United States. These coming days will be packed with multiple engagements, meetings and an address at the United Nations General Assembly. This is the Prime Minister's 7th visit to the US since the BJP government came to power in 2014. Before leaving, the Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting, the occasion is going to strengthen India's strategic partnership with the US, and India will consolidate ties with Japan and Australia. He also tweeted about his visit, saying that India will continue to have dialogue, exchange views on areas of mutual interest and discuss global issues and explore ideas for cooperation between India and the United States. Let's give you a quick roundup of how the coming days are going to look like. Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to reach Washington tomorrow. On Thursday, he has crucial bilateral meetings scheduled with the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga and the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. He is also going to sit down with US Vice President Kamala Harris. Remember, this is in the backdrop of the controversial AUKUS agreement. It is yet to be seen how it will impact India's ties with its neighbors. Friday will be a crucial day for the Prime Minister and India's strategic relationship with the US. Prime Minister Modi is going to hold a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden. This will be Prime Minister Modi's first in-person meeting with Joe Biden after he took office in January as the American president. Both the countries are touting this to be a global strategic partnership. Later that day, he is going to take part in the Quad's first in-person summit. The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Partnership includes the US, Australia and Japan. The leaders are set to review progress made in the first virtual summit in March this year. The crisis in Afghanistan and its ripple effect in the region is going to be a priority. Other regional issues and shared interests will also be on the table. In the New York leg of his visit, the Prime Minister will be addressing the general debate at the UNGA session, which will cover a range of issues from reinforcing strategic partnerships, recovery from COVID-19, rebuilding sustainability, the climate crisis, curbing extremism and cross-border terror, to revitalizing the United Nations. Let's go straight across to our correspondents. Siddhant Sibal with us from Washington, D.C. Also with us is our correspondent Susan Teherani joining us from the United Nations headquarters. Thanks very much for being here. Siddhant, coming to you first, a lot of expectations from this crucial visit of the Indian Prime Minister. He is already on his way to the United States. Bring us up to speed with what the first few hours for the Indian Prime Minister will look like in the United States.
Well, yes, Molly, the security is being beefed up in and around the hotel where the Indian Prime Minister is staying. I'm just standing nearby. And of course, this is a visit full of a lot of geopolitics. First, of course, he is expected to meet the business leaders, hold bilaterals with the Japanese and Australian Prime Minister. That remains the focus. But also the big focus remains on Friday when, of course, he holds bilateral with the US President Joe Biden, the first in-person bilateral between the two leaders, and of course the Quad leaders meeting as well. Quad is something that is formally being formalized here in Washington this week, and this is something which China will be keenly noting. Of course, China has been making comments against Quad, calling it as an Asian NATO, something that has been dismissed by the Quad member countries. But largely, if you look at the focus areas when it comes to Quad, Quad has been working on COVID cooperation, and of course other things are also expected in terms of outcome in this Quad summit. In fact, what is interesting is that the US President Joe Biden made a mention of Quad during his address at the United Nations General Assembly, making a reference to India as well. That shows the intent of Washington in terms of making sure that Quad is something that grows leaps and bounds. And we spoke to the envoy as well, the Indian envoy, Taranjeet Sandhu, who clearly outlined the key areas of cooperation, how the working groups that were established after the first virtual Quad summit on 12th of March are working. We know the key outcome of that meeting was the vaccine initiative under which American vaccines will be made in India, and of course logistically and financially supported by the Japanese and the Australians. But by and large, this visit is a visit high on expectation, high on geopolitics, and of course there can be welcoming as well by the Indian diaspora. It is now known that the Indian diaspora has planned a grand welcome when the Prime Minister lands here. Prime Minister lands at 6 p.m. Local time, that's 3:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time, and we know that the Indian diaspora they will be going to the airport to welcome the Prime Minister, as has been the case always. And of course at the hotel also we do expect the similar welcome we have seen when it comes to Prime Minister going to various countries. The diaspora usually is present on the ground welcoming the Prime Minister.
Right. Susan, if I can get you in at this point, in just a short while from now, US President Joe Biden will be hosting the COVID-19 virtual summit. Yesterday, throughout the address of both the American president, also the UN Secretary General, COVID-19, the issue of vaccine inequity were key focus areas. Bring us up to speed with what the agenda is looking like for this virtual summit.
Right, the President and the UN Secretary General really yesterday talked about COVID, the pandemic, and climate change, really two parallel challenges that the UNGA is focused on, and we did see that from the two leaders. But today, yes, it is all about this COVID summit that has been anticipated on the part of the White House. What we do know is that it is expected to be announced that the United States will purchase from Pfizer an additional 500 million vaccines to donate to lower income countries, which will bring all in all the number of U.S. vaccines donated to the world to 1.1 billion. The United States and the Biden administration insist that this is a no strings attached initiative and hopes to end the pandemic, an ambitious hope, by 2022. This is the outline, general outline of the summit. Now, this is a summit that's going to be with world leaders, NGOs, the private sectors, and other partners from around the world as well. It's a virtual summit. It's 4 hours. It's going to be divided into 1 hour separate sessions. Prior to this summit, journalists were able to have an off-the-record sort of Q&A with senior administration officials, and one of the questions was how much will the president himself sort of be involved in this summit, and the answer was that he's going to be involved notably in the beginning and the opening ceremony and the first sessions of this summit. And the first session is called Calling the World to Account. Since it's going to be divided into 4 sections, the second section, if you're interested, is going to be called Save Lives Now. The third, we're all familiar with the slogan, Build Back Better. And the fourth session will be a closing session, sort of a closing ceremony, which Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, will take part in. It will be moderated by a COVID chief from the White House, and it's really aimed to call on world leaders to take more action on COVID, in tackling COVID, with the U.S. having a leadership role. Now, skeptics might say that this is sort of to find a solution to the COVID crisis and put an end to it. It's ambitious, it's lofty, it's positive, but perhaps what's not being said and what's missing is holding China accountable in a way and trying to find the origins of the virus in the first place so something like this doesn't happen again. That's perhaps something that's missing in the equation and then discussion, and we'll see if that comes up in a summit like this.
Tehrani Sadan Sibil will continue to get us all those developments, leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much.